Welcome to Resume the Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Page, and I'm here to spread the message that you can, in fact, be happy in your career. I'm a former executive recruiter turned career coach, and I am obsessed with learning about why people have chosen their career, what led them to that decision, and how they achieved happiness in the process. So, come join the ongoing conversation that exposes you to career paths of all origins with one thing in common: happiness. So, press play and let's resume the conversation with this week's episode. Okay, our guest today is Jonathan Quigg. Quiggy, as he is affectionately called, is a life coach and mindfulness and meditation teacher. Now based in Denver, he has spent over 10 years traveling Asia, specifically Vietnam and Thailand. While there, he taught English and immersed himself in the rich culture embracing the ancient practice of meditation. He has since sat on over 10 multiple-day silent retreats. And in Denver, he now has his own coaching practice and often hosts incredible retreats based around the concept of cultivating your own personal growth within the context of the greater good. Quiggy, I've been waiting to see your name. Quiggy is here.
Love it.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, a pleasure. I'm stoked to chat with you and appreciate the lovely introduction. The one adjustment I'll say is that I didn't spend 10 years traveling Asia. I did live in Vietnam for 3 years, spent a lot of time in Thailand.
Okay, cool. Why did I think 10 years? Oh, you know what? I think I got that mixed up with the 10-day multiple retreat. Okay.
Yeah.
3 years is still a considerable amount of time to spend. Like, I spent 5 months in Asia, and then I went back like a couple years later and spent a month, and I'm like, I lived in Asia. So 3 years, 10 years, it's a lot. I like to start off by asking everybody, if you were at a dinner party or if you were chatting with somebody at a yoga class and that you didn't know, or in the grocery line, and if they were like, oh, what do you do? What would Quiggy say?
So I'm a self-realization coach, first and foremost, but that's integrated with meditation, coaching, and teaching. And I also integrate my DJing and music into the different workshops and retreats and offerings that I have. I'd say my mission is twofold. On the individual level, it's to really empower people to develop a loving, empowered relationship with themselves. I think all the things that we want out there, whether it's the job or the relationship or the things or the feelings, they all can be reduced down to our relationship with ourselves because we're a reflection of the world around us. And so I think what we need more than anything right now is to be able to turn towards ourselves, to turn inwards, and to learn to love ourselves, learn to be kind, compassionate, to follow our curiosity and our passions. And so I help people do that in whatever way is uniquely needed for them. On the community level, I'm creating spaces as much as possible in the ecstatic dances that I do. I'm hosting a retreat soon. The podcast is a way to put these messages out there to create a community of this culture of self-love in balance with love for one another. I believe at the deepest insight in my mission is that when we learn to love ourselves, when we fill our own cups up, it just naturally spills over into the world around us. So I believe in cultivating a culture through coaching, through community events, and through teaching where we have a higher priority of our own happiness and well-being, because naturally that's going to create a better world for all.
Yeah, so well said. We could just end it there because you just covered all of it. Yes. And I did forget to mention that you just started your own podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called? Plug it.
It's called Grow the Goodness in You, which is the tagline for my corporation, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Your brand.
My brand. Because for me, personal growth is the driver. Growth mindset is really the prerequisite for, I think, health and happiness and being and living a fulfilling life. So yeah. The mission of the podcast is in a short, sweet, simple, concise 15 to 30 minutes max currently, although I could talk for a long time, so I'm appreciative here, to just inspire the best in those out there to take radical responsibility for their health, healing, and happiness. Start with a little meditation just to help us ground, I think is a great way to open receptivity when you're learning and listening in a podcast. And then I just explain, either tell a story or have insights on a particular topic. And at the end, I like to wrap it up with kind of a coaching strategy, offering some reflection questions. So it's something that people can integrate. They can take away, say, oh, I learned this awesome thing. It got these ideas moving for me. how can I apply that to my own life? Because to me, life is practice. And so we can learn, and that's knowledge. But I like to think of, as it's been said, wisdom being knowledge and application. So we take what we learn in a podcast, and I want to give it to people in a way that people can then take it and then apply it to their lives. So that's the mission. Thank you, Finn.
I love it. Yeah, of course. I'm definitely going to listen now. That I love the idea of starting with a little meditation, because I listen to 99% of the time, I'm listening to a podcast in the car. And as somebody who, I live in Florida, and I don't know if you've ever driven in Florida, but it's not fun. And it's a little insane. And with my 3-year-old in the back, it's like, I really have to be careful about what I say. So I think doing a little like driving meditation would be amazing. Okay, you said so much that I want to get into. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I want to go back to when you were a kid. And I'm always curious to know what you wanted to be when you were a kid, what people wanted to be when they were a kid. Like the age-old question, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I don't know that I had such a clear idea, maybe in the way that we tend to when that question is answered. I don't know that it was clear. I think for a long time, it's been unclear for me. And I think that's characteristic of what my journey has been, which has been a lot of exploration, a lot of experimentation, taking one step at a time, following my passions, following my curiosities. There was never a definitive like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. Although I'd love to be an astronaut, that'd be great, but it just wasn't in the cards for me.
There are a couple prerequisites for that.
It's not impossible, but I think one of the things that I want to articulate in my journey in our conversation is, for me, mine was a very like try a bunch of different things exploration path. It was never like I want to be this and I'm willing to commit my entire life to this. Like when I was in college, I was on a pre-med track and I thought, let's be a doctor. That didn't last long because I couldn't handle the weeding you out of organic chemistry and the trying to kick your ass of the freshman biology. So I was just like, this doesn't seem right for me. So I never really had that like long-term vision really through my teens and my 20s. It only has really come in the past 3-4 years, but it'd been building. I'd been growing. These seeds had been growing underneath the ground, but there was never a like, this is where I'm going until now. So it's taken some time.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that one of my favorite quotes, and I feel like I say this in like every episode, but it's just so true. One of my favorite quotes is from Steve Jobs, and it's, you can only connect the dots looking backward. And it's so true, because I'm sure there were things that came up in your pre-med studies or just a realization that wasn't what you wanted to do and that it didn't fit. Just having that awareness at such a young age is going to inform so many other future decisions. And so I'm curious to know, like, how did you come to the realization that it wasn't the right fit, other than you didn't like the idea of getting weeded out and organic chemistry? Organic chemistry sounds like a bear, but was there something else that kind of helped you sit into that realization? Or was it, I just don't fit in here, like this isn't?
Studying abroad in the Netherlands. And honestly, it was, so I didn't travel Asia for 10 years, but I have traveled extensively, really from that point as a junior in college at 19, 20, and over the past almost years now. I studied abroad in the Netherlands. And honestly, these two of my best buddies, these two Australian guys, Steve and Trent, I love them very much. They have been so instrumental just in finding my authenticity and thinking outside of the box. And I remember being very regimented in college at that time, and I was studying psychology, which has always been the like natural curiosity, and my career path has reflected that. But the pre-med was more of an out there kind of idea. It was hinged on prestige, making money. Like I knew that I wanted to help people. That had been clear. But being a doctor as the path, there was some cognitive dissonance. And when I studied abroad and I realized how much freedom and learning was accessible to me, I think it really just ignited the curiosity that then took me into the next 10 years of my life to really come to, okay, I want to help people, but what's the right way for me to help? Because I think I was living on a track that was not necessarily for me, and that just blew it out of the water. And I came back being like, I want to live my life. I don't want to go to bio. And it's taken a long time to come back to the place of like really loving to learn for the right reasons. Now, I love biology. I love these sciences, but it's rooted in an authenticity that experience, that lived experience had to.
Yeah. And just for anybody listening, if you have the opportunity to study abroad, the things it does for your soul it's incredible. For me, it was also just like a huge curiosity catalyst. And it completely changed how I view my worldview. And I love the Netherlands. That's fun. I actually just went to the Netherlands for the first time. It was like 4 years ago now, but before, it was like my last trip right before like COVID and all of that. But it's such a beautiful country. Were you in Amsterdam?
So I studied in Maastricht, which is where the EU was formed. Is like a little tiny, it looks like Amsterdam in so many ways, but it's just smaller and student oriented.
Yeah, my roommate studied there actually. So funny.
Cool.
Yeah, Maastricht. That's so funny. Cool. So, okay, you graduated with a degree in psychology. So bring me through, you were abroad and then you came back and you graduated and then you went to Asia?
Not quite. It was about 5 years after college before I went to Asia.
The reason I'm asking, I have heard of a lot of people I taught English abroad and I hear it a lot. And I think there's just like, oh, okay, yeah, because we hear it a lot. And I'm curious to know how you came to the decision to do that. And also, what is that? Do you have to be fluent in another language? How did you choose what country to go to? I'm just curious to know like what was going on before that decision and how you made that decision.
Yeah. First of all, I second the pitch to study abroad or travel in any intensive, deep way that you can at any point in your life, whether you're young or older. It is
totally
so important to, like you say, I love that curiosity catalyst. It's a beautiful way to articulate that soul ignition that can happen from that. And just getting yourself out of your bubble. I think part of what gets in our way is our perspective is so limited because we're looking at what's in front of us and what's around us. And our culture is only one example of that. So when we go see other things, it really starts to help you unwind the box of your expectation. I think that's really beautiful and important. And for me, that was that catalyst. So after school, I was like, I don't want to go into a desk job. So I was a Segway tour guide on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and I was an au pair for a Jack Russell Terrier as my two jobs out of college. I proudly say, really putting that degree to work. But those experiences were such great explorations and developments of my strengths to be a speaker, to be a guide, to serve people in that way. And then I backpacked for about 8 months through South America and through Europe. I came back and lived in New York City for a little bit, worked in a hostel because I was exploring the idea of, do I want to open a hostel? I love to host people. At my best, I'm the life of the party. I create glue for people and create community. And then I got lost on that track. Oh, I've been working also in summer camp too. That's really the earliest inclinations of my coaching world. I went to a summer camp when I was a kid. I was obese by 13 and I went to a weight loss program, completely saved my life, afforded me with this growth mindset and this empowerment to be able to change my circumstances. And so coming back in my 20s, I started working there as a counselor and as a natural mentor and coach, like kind of early inklings of that for overweight kids and teens. And that became not just physical, but mental, emotional, then spiritual as I grew, guidance. And that was always really the place that felt most at home. And I couldn't really figure out how to do that outside of summer. Like that felt very comfortable and right for me. The hostel thing I tried, it came to an end and I was sitting in New York City and being like, okay, I got to get out of here. It's not the culture for me. It's very money and power oriented. And I hadn't really grounded myself enough to be able to discern myself from that. So I was getting pulled into it. And the idea of teaching English is something that floats around and is an accessible path to the backpacking world. And so I was just like, I've never been to Asia. I've always wanted to go. And at this time I'd been meditating for 2 years in New York City. So it was about 23. And I really wanted to go on a silent retreat. And so I remember looking at the end of winter, really feeling quite depressed and lost after the hostel thing had fallen to the wayside. And I couldn't really figure out how to make this like giving, mentoring of people to click outside of summer camp. I wanted to go, but I was ready to run away. So I wanted to do a meditation retreat. So I was looking at something over the summer and everything was booked. There was one retreat open between now and the start of the school year if I were to move abroad. And it was the next day. It was the last of 100 slots. And as with several moments in my life with meditation, things have never felt so just clear. There's no procrastination. It was like, well, here we go. So I signed up and did my first 5-day silent retreat And it completely changed my life. It changed my attitude, my energy, my direction. It made it so clear that meditation was vitally important to me. So I lived in New York City for 8 more months, like really enjoying it. And then I moved to Vietnam, which is a very accessible teaching market. They've maybe closed in some of their rigidity at this point, but it's one you can just jump into. Whereas like China and South Korea are a little bit more like standardized in the way that you apply for the process. This is like it's just a blossoming. It's like getting a restaurant job. Like you can just show up and like walk around.
Oh, wow.
At the door. And yeah, I really went with the intention of, okay, I'm going to explore teaching as a way to see, do I want to be a teacher? But I also wanted to deepen my meditation practice. I needed space from, again, this culture that I was feeling just like overwhelmed in.
Yeah.
And realized, wow, okay, I've got a breath of this fresh air from this retreat. And I've seen, like, I just got a shiver right now. I've seen the light, so to speak. I'm going to go explore this. So it was a great opportunity to be in a very easy work-life culture. Like you don't have to teach more than 10, 20 hours a week.
Oh,
and so it afforded
wow.
you time to like focus on myself. I did a lot of journaling, a lot of meditation. I would go to Thailand and do 10-day retreats at a monastery there, explore a bit. So I was really in an inner exploration. This is my 26 through 8, 29. And I was really just in an inner exploration. So it's not just exploring teaching and different cultures, but I was really going in deep. And that was the catalyst to then come to the kind of end of the total exploration phase, which I'll speak to in a moment. But
yeah, I'm curious also to go back a bit to when you started your meditation practice and how that came about. Like what drew you to the practice at the beginning?
The weight, the obesity was on its surface a physical issue. And that is the reality for so many of the symptoms that we experience in this day and age. Like there is a physical, like outward appearance of what's going on, but there's so much depth to it that we may not touch if we're just staying at the surface. So I was very fortunate to go to these summer camps through high school that allowed me to go from 300 pounds to around 200 and to maintain a healthy
That's
weight.
amazing.
Yeah. But I was very rigid. Like through college, I was very like, I was in diet mode in terms of my nutrition. I exercised very hard on myself. And I started to see the cracks in that. I started to see the discrepancy between what was physically my outward appearance was I was healthy by any third-party perspective. I looked good in terms of the vanity that I was looking for, but I didn't feel good. Like there was so much anxiety around, oh, I got to go to the gym. It's all or nothing. I was just starting to see the mind a little bit more clearly. And a friend had recommended Headspace to me. And thank you, Sam. And thank you, Andy, who ran Headspace, who was just this beautiful, elegantly sounding British man who taught me how to meditate. And I just started to see, whoa, like the mind there's a whole thing back here that's like, I can go to the gym every day and I can eat all these things and like stay healthy, but like, I'm not happy. And so this really was the catalyst to A, want to be more present, and B, be happier and be more okay with where I'm at and appreciative of that. And it really was that first retreat that really sent that in the direction of more of an intentional spiritual path that aligned with also the personal growth and healing that can be done from it.
Yeah. And can you talk a bit about what a silent retreat is? Because I think we might have, as just a general society, this idea of like super hippies, like walking around just like super peaceful, which is cool. But what is the purpose of a silent retreat as opposed to a different type of retreat?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked this. And if anyone wants to dive more into this, my latest episode was just coming off of the retreat I did recently. So if you want some more, but in terms of, so the one thing I will say is that there is a funny experience, especially when you're doing retreat in a retreat center. So I've done 3 retreats at Swan Mok, which is in southern Thailand, and they have a retreat for international students that they do in English. It's beautiful. You're in the Thai forest, and there's like kimono dragons walking across the way, and like it's just you're in it. It is the most
you are in it with the dragons.
And you're like, and these were intense. So these are not. This is like the more intense. Like go to Asia, where practice is much more intensive. They're much more luxurious and easier, more comfortable options now available in the West. So I'm not by any means saying this is the only route. In fact, there are many to choose from. But this is like sleeping on a wooden bed, like wooden pillow. Like the monk who started this center was really intent on removing the worldly pleasures that cause craving. And it's a lot of this like intense craving with money and we're just removing that. So it was intense. But the funny thing is when you have to cover your knees robes, and you're walking around and everybody's silent doing walking meditation. And it does look like a psych ward. From an outward perspective, people be like, what on earth is going on here? Like,
I love it.
There are those funny moments that you connect with how absurd it can look from an outward perspective.
Which is true of life anyway. How many things it's so funny you say that, because just last night I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I have said so many times to my parents, I'm like, it's like a psych ward here. And I took a video. My 1-year-old is literally just spinning in circles. Like, he just learned how to walk and he's spinning in circles because he likes the feeling of being dizzy. My daughter is walking around with sunglasses saying, I can't see. I can't see. Yeah. And I take a video. I'm like, this is psych ward. Like, it's a fun one. I like being here. But it's like, there's so many things in just everyday life that are accepted. And so we don't see them as this is crazy. What we're doing, sitting at a desk all day long is insane. Like, that's crazy. So yeah, I could see that walking around and catching a glimpse of a group of people walking in knee-length robes being silent might seem crazy, but it's really not any crazier than sitting for 12 hours a day.
I love that perspective. And I think that's something which is what you are trying to do with this podcast and what I also want to do with my messaging, which is, to change our perception and our perspective on what we think is normal and okay and healthy, because culturally, we get a certain message, and our tendency as humans is to absorb beliefs very quickly and just like, all right, whatever, like, I'm down.
Just accept it, like blind acceptance. Yeah.
And we need this healthy skepticism and curiosity to come closer to what is actually right and actually healthy and true for us. And for some people, that might be sitting at a desk all day. Like, I'm not going to say that that's not a life for some people who want to do that if they find something that really lights them up. Cool.
Totally.
But for most people to blindly accept that as the only way and that's normal, I think that's where we get in trouble, Right. So I really appreciate that sentiment of like, hey, it's all how you look at it, and the perspective that you're willing to let in new perspective is such an important aspect of finding this happiness, whether it's in a meditation retreat or in your work.
Yeah. And there's so many different types of meditation and Buddhism. And I'm not sure if you have like a certain type of meditation that you practice, or if you can dabble in all of them. And just curious to know if you could break that down a little bit. Like, I think people because now, thankfully, meditation is recommended. And I think it can get a little almost overwhelming and intimidating for someone who's really not familiar with it. And it's like, oh, there's TM meditation, there's Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan meditation, and there's all these different types, and it can get really confusing and overwhelming and intimidating. So I'm curious to know if you can break that down a little bit if someone is looking to get into meditation.
Totally. I really appreciate that question. And it is a big blockage. You're familiar with analysis paralysis. We live in a world with far too many options. It's much harder to buy a car when there's 6 to 8 options than when there's 2 options. And so same with meditation. I think there's kind of 2 ways to approach it. And I like to, again, this attitude of exploration, experimentation, and authenticity is really the intentions that are worth showing up to this with. I personally have practiced so many different tools and techniques and different trajectories of meditation theory and just absorbed what feels good for me. I've created a toolbox, and my toolbox is full of things that are non-denominational. They're all over the place. For others, it might make more sense to find something that works for them and just follow that trajectory. And I think for those who are exploring that and trying to figure that out, whether it is one thing or it is many things, it's just one step at a time. And I think the biggest barrier to entry is is that analysis paralysis. This is expectation of like, oh my God, I got to do this. Well, I got to do this an hour every day. Like, when am I going to find an hour? It's like, no, you can have a profound impact on your life by sitting intentionally for 3 minutes every day. And it can be transcendental meditation. It can be mindfulness of breathing. It can be yoga. It can be swimming. It's the intentionality of grounding your attention in the present moment in whatever way that is most accessible for you. That's going to have profound impact. That's the meditation that you're looking for. And it looks different for everybody. So I would encourage people to explore. I mean, I love the way that technology, one of the things that I think technology is doing well is bringing some of these things to more people. So Headspace was how I broke into it. Calm and Insight Timer all have teachings brought right to your doorstep. And I think accessibility and convenience is a huge factor to start with.
Yeah.
And then to come back to your question about meditation retreats will just deepen your may I swear on this?
Yeah.
A meditation retreat will deepen your fuck yes on meditation because you can get so much from a little, but you're when you get into it. And so it's really just an experiential learning in the same way that I learned from a study abroad experience, in the same way that I learned from summer camp, in the same way that you learn from going to a music festival for a weekend. It's this experiential embodied practice in a space that's specifically conducive to it that really opens your eyes, your heart, your mind, and your soul to what this can do for you. And so for me, on the outside of my first one is, okay, I think I've worked up the courage to do it, but I'm not really sure what I'm getting into. Blew my heart wide open. And there was just clarity right from that. I think a lot of people who do asanas regularly or meditation retreats regularly, once you experience that, you're like, oh no, I ain't staying over here. I'm ready to go to expand and open this up. And the retreat experience is something that you can return to in your life. My first teacher spoke to it. Actually, the new analogy is like cleaning. We do a little bit of cleaning for the mind. I don't really clean a lot, so this is a really hard analogy for me to do.
It's okay. I'm thinking of when you're driving and you just do the windshield wiper and it's just a quick clean as opposed to getting the car totally inside out clean.
Exactly. That's meditation retreats. You do a little bit of cleaning here and there, but the deep spring cleaning for the mind and for the emotional quality that you're experiencing in the body and the soul, that's what a meditation retreat does. So it's not something you need to do every day. Some people commit their lives to it. You can be a monk and meditate every day in a cave, and they're really happy and for good reasons. But this retreat experience is a really wonderful way to commit to deepening your practice and also deepening your perspective on what health and happiness is and what's possible for you. And yeah, it's tough. You are meditating all day. Much of the Western retreat world has met us more where we're at. There are comfortable facilities and there's plenty of breaks and there's yoga integrated. There's so many different options to approach this. You don't have to go to Thailand and sleep on a wooden bed. And I wouldn't do that anymore. I'm happy with
There's an age. I feel like there's an age for that kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's just me. It's funny because I have personally, and this also might just be me, but I really resonate with what you're talking about in terms of the very immersive, intensive experiences. And when I look back on my life, all of my best moments and my breakthroughs and the best experiences in terms of growth have been these very intensive programs or trainings or those types of structured, you're in this. And when I was abroad, it was and you can't go home. There's you're stuck here and you're across the world. And then another one was down the street when I was doing my yoga teacher training. It was a very intensive process. It was a month-long, everyday thing. But when I look back, all of my favorite moments in terms of personal growth have been in those kind of immersive experiences. And I think it's partly because when you're in those immersive experiences, you're experiencing it for a long enough time that it's hard when you're through it to toss it aside because you have invested so much time in it. You know what I mean? As opposed to I went to a yoga class and that was good. I'm sore. But to go through the entire training, it's there's a whole methodology and a whole ancient belief system behind this. And same in meditation, same with just traveling. You can experience life in the day of as opposed to a tourist. It's just such a different experience. And I think we take so much more away from really investing our time and energy somewhere for a long period of time than we do just going for a quick hour-long thing. Not to say that's a bad thing. Go for the hour-long thing if that's what is available to you at this time in your life and whatever season you're in. Whatever you can do it. But if I just talking to anybody who has an opportunity to do a cool intensive, or if they're on the fence about it, just do it, go for it. It's totally in my experience anyway, it's always been worth it.
Agreed 100%. And just to piggyback off of that, I think there's a depth of intention, immersion, and integration that I think it's not just that we do things, but it's how we do them.
Yes.
The why and the energy and the focus and attention that we're bringing to it. And I think a big piece of the immersion benefit is that we're so distracted. Like there's so many competing forces for our attention. Like sitting down for 3 minutes of meditation might be all that's accessible for you with all of the other responsibilities and things that are going on in your life. Yeah, that makes sense in that context. But when we can step into a container intentionally with the desire to grow or explore or like let go, we can put all the distractions down and really immerse ourselves in a way that absorbs these learnings in a deeper way.
So well said. Yeah. So
nice.
And I'm just thinking like, if you live in a house with a lot of people in it, if a multi-generational house, or if you just have a lot of siblings, or if you're a parent, like it can be really hard to do a 3-minute meditation. Like you might just not have time with school or work or kids or whatever it is, all those other, responsibilities, like you mentioned. And 3 minutes might be all that you have. So having any kind of opportunity to just put those aside, like they'll be there. They'll always be there. Like you can go back to the distractions, right? It's nice to be able to put them aside. And so, okay, I'm really curious to know, when you came back to the States after being in Asia for 3 years, what was that transition like, reintegrating into the American culture after having this like really incredible experience? What was that like? And I think that can have kind of a weird like reverse culture shock sometimes.
Sure.
And I'm curious to know from someone who has such a deep and wonderful meditation practice, how you dealt with that transition, if there was any kind of reverse culture shock.
Yeah, there was definitely an adjustment in terms of culture. It was more of an adjustment in terms of life trajectory. What really, I had gone, as with my New York story, like I had gone to explore. And then towards the end of the experimentation, where like the first couple of years felt great, my body and my heart was telling me this is over. So I had fallen right when I got to Vietnam. So this like cascade of chronic injury piled up over the years.
Oh my God.
A tough relationship where we couldn't get over toxic codependency and conflict. And then COVID hit and there was just so much, and I started having insomnia. There was just so much like that was coming up that the culture shock was not so much from being in America. It was from like cutting loose something that was so fun for so long and just giving myself radical permission to go home and heal. And I think part of the deeper message that was happening for me too is, okay, I've done the English teaching thing. Like I've gone for a couple years and like, it's fun to go like play with a bunch of 5-6-year-olds and like teach them to some basic English words. Like I love that. But I was checking out to what was really the deeper responsibility and calling that I felt for myself. So going home was radical permission to heal. And part of that also was the growth of like redefining who I was, healing my relational patterns. And then I signed up for Jay Shetty's life coaching certification school. I was like, I'm ready to do this. I'm like ready to take this to the next level. And that was really that like phoenix rising out of the ashes, which was really painful. And I'm still in many ways healing a lot of the things that were brought to my attention more clearly during that time, have been the catalyst for also the growth to step into my own power, to develop my relationship with myself so that it's clear, confident, grounded, compassionate, and then to be able to articulate those gifts that I have become more clear on into an offering to the world around me. So that really was, the culture shock was going home and not being in Vietnam, which is like a real fun life. I'm living in my dad's home by myself in the middle of Buffalo and just like going through a breakup and like, it was brutal.
Yeah.
But it redefined me and it helped me find and start to integrate all these things that I had been exploring, explaining to me like, okay, I'm ready to make this step. Ready to do this.
And like I said earlier, it's not a far cry from studying psychology, going into life coaching. And I am interested to know, where did the idea of life coaching come in? Like, were you just surfing the web or had you heard about it? Like, because I think a while ago, life coaching, and now the coaching industry is incredible and it's much more well received. But for a time, it was not. It was like, oh, you're a coach. Okay, like whatever. But now I think it's much more well received and you have great voices like Jay Shetty. Jay Shetty's podcast is one that got me hooked on podcasts. I used to drive my daughter because that was like the only place she would sleep was in the car. So I listen to a lot of Jay Shetty in the car, driving my daughter
Cool.
while she was sleeping. And he's great. He's incredible. And I'm interested to know where life coaching showed up for you and how you found it. And then also, out of all of the certification programs, there's so many. How did you narrow in on Jay Shetty's?
I would say life coaching is just a natural extension of the gifts and the skills that I've been cultivating for my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And mentoring, coming back to the summer camps, which I did 4 or 5 years in camps, the mentoring was so natural for me. It felt really like home, like this is the space, like this is my giving back, and how natural it is to give back as someone who has worked through obesity and can come back and say, hey, like you can do this, like this is possible. And how that grew really naturally as my spiritual path grew. And so it became much more about like, instead of how do I guide this teenager to like exercise better, is like, how do I guide them to let go and be more present? And so that, and like the teaching was an exploration of that. And I remember just in this moment of shifting, I've been listening to a lot of Jay Shetty, and to why I chose him, I had been in this very like idealistic, and there's still an idealism in me. Like I believe in a better world and want to be a force for change in that. There's been a lot of loosening and expectation around that. But there was a time where I'm going to be a monk. I'm just going to practice. And in many ways, that would be a much more simple life. And I think what I was realizing through Jay Shetty's really beautiful brand of balance between the spiritual and the worldly really inspired me to come back, because he was a business graduate, had great job offerings. And then he was like, screw it. Went to India for 3 years as a monk, and then he came back. And what he's done is he's integrated so beautifully. And you see this in so many, and I think that's what maybe hopefully a lot of coaches are doing, is integrating these beautiful spiritual practices and helping use that to change the world. And so I was really inspired by that. And I was like, okay, I could just stay here in the cave, in the trees with the Komodo dragons, and that would be great. Like, I think it'd be a happy life, but I want to change the world. Like, how am I going to do that if I'm not putting myself out there? So there was this invitation from his approach that really drew me in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt at that time, it was like, oh my God, this is totally the modality for me, because it totally resonated with the way that I have all that curiosity and that exploration and the learning by doing. Like, coaching is what I have done for myself and my own personal growth in my life. I've just now put a name to it and like articulated more clearly skills that I can develop. So there was never a doubt in my mind. It was, I took the intro course, and I was like, this is it. Like, what an amazing skill to empower people, which is what it's about. It's not about just giving them the answers. It's about giving them the tools and helping them empower themselves, love themselves better. So many different things you can do with it. And that just really resonated with me as the way that I approach my own growth.
Yeah.
It's taken off for a reason.
Yeah. And while you're talking, I keep thinking of this feeling of either pushing, like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, or being pulled towards something. And I think a lot of us get stuck pushing the boulder, and we don't even realize we're doing it until there's something that pulls us, and it just feels easier. And it's almost like this, oh my gosh, why does this feel so easy all of a sudden? And then there's almost like a domino effect where you start to go down this path, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, this opportunity came, or, oh, this course is really cool. Let me follow that. And all of a sudden you've created this little great life that feels in alignment with what you are. And I think there's a lot of power in recognizing those moments where you're being pulled, and also recognizing those moments when you're just pushing way too hard. And it really doesn't have to be that hard. That said, there are going to be hard moments in life, of course, but I love what you were talking about with integrating the spiritual into the practical, because for so long there has been a really big divide. And I think now wellness is coming up and mindfulness is coming up, and it's amazing to see how that has really snowballed into the zeitgeist. And I just think it's amazing to have people who embrace it as their career. And that's actually something that I want to ask you about. Is it's one thing to meditate and really develop that practice. It's another thing to go through the certification, and that's amazing. And that takes there's a lot that goes into that. And then there's the whole starting a business, which is like over on left field from meditating and studying and all. It's just
The harder part.
it's a totally different animal. And I think that's where we have a lot of people in the world who want to do good and they want to spread this message, and they have amazing intentions, but they get stuck behind this, like, how do I run a business? How do I do, like, what do I actually do? Like, how do I get clients? How do I start it? Like all the nitty gritty of it, and also just the confidence to do it. So I'm really interested to know how you tackled that beast. I know that's like a really loaded question and I just threw a lot at you, but
well, if you're looking for the answer of how to start a business, I'd like to know the answer if you find it.
Sure. Okay. I'll email you when I find out. But what made you want to do coaching as a business, like on your own, as opposed to maybe now you can find coaching positions within companies, and that's great. But yeah, what made you want to be an entrepreneur? Because that's like a different thing.
I don't like being told what to do. I don't get along well with authority.
It is.
I think there's a creative autonomy that I really deeply appreciate. I want to come back to what you were saying about the energetics, because I think there's such an important point there that is relevant to this answer as well.
Sure.
That pushing up, the pushing energy versus the pulling energy. I think you so beautifully spoken to the kinesthetic experience we can have. And what I wanted to add to that is that's non-linear. We go back and forth. And even as an entrepreneur right now, like I'm constantly having to catch myself getting into the pushing when even though the initial stage was a pulling, oh yes, this is right. I just started a 2-year meditation teacher training program. And when I started, it was like being pulled. There's so much like pushing that I'm energetically having to pay attention to coming up and having to realign myself so that I'm not, because that journey is nonlinear. It's happening and we get pulled into it and we have to mitigate that. And I think that's the importance of the meditation piece and the self-awareness piece, because that's what cultivates the awareness to be able to discern for myself or for oneself. Oh, the energy of this is baked in resistance. It's baked in, I have to do this. It's baked into, it's burdensome. And I think as entrepreneurs, really is a personal journey, because your business is a reflection of yourself. Whether you're having fun creating a business or having a miserable time creating a business is a reflection of yourself. And so being able to discern that energetically is nonlinear and happening constantly. And I will say that in terms of starting a business, I knew that I wanted to create something unique, a unique reflection of me. And I didn't know exactly what that looked like at the beginning, and it's grown. And this is something that I continue to want to hone in on as my message is that exploration and that curiosity. I've had to experiment. I'm still experimenting to figure out what really lands and feels authentic for me, that I can feel like I'm being pulled up the hill more often than not. Yeah. And then having the awareness to notice, especially learning how to run a business and the marketing, things that are less comfortable for me. They're new skills. They're out of my wheelhouse. I'm creating the wheelhouse. There's a lot more of that feeling like I'm pushing it up the hill. And I have to notice, I think an entrepreneur has to, what I keep coming back to is this all depends on my self-care. This all depends on my self-relationship. Like if I'm not taking care of myself, I get yanked into this is just another job. I have to notice when that happens. I think we all have to notice when that happens, catch ourselves and ground ourselves, journal, spend time in nature, meditate, listen to music, like find that energy you're speaking to of being pulled, and then get back into that space, because that's where the sustainability and the long-term passion and the love for what you're doing and the service can really grow. But we're also conditioned by the rat race, by the sitting in your desk for 12 hours. That's what we're gonna turn to if we're not paying attention. If we're not taking care of ourselves, our brain and our body is gonna snap to that, even if we're doing something we fucking love doing. So I think really the biggest practice is just learning to reconnect with that intention. And it has to happen on a daily basis, sometimes moment to moment.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just thinking of two things. One, you touched on this, and just the daily push and pull is so real. It's so real. And I think it needs to be said, like from the mountaintop, that even if you're doing something and pursuing like your life purpose, there are gonna be just aspects of that job, whatever it is, that aren't super fun, that aren't like, that you don't want to do, like marketing, you mentioned. It's hard. But you have to do it if you want to do what you're doing, right? So there are going to be things in any career that you choose that like you might just not want to do, but you have to do it in order to do the thing that you love, right? So there's that. And also just the aspect of having a daily practice. I can't say enough how much that reconnecting and that grounding serves you. For me personally, I notice how journaling is a big thing that I know just helps me get in the creative flow and just like unload all of the great things that happen when you just let loose. It's funny because my husband we were talking and I got out of it for a while. Like I was doing this great like morning routine and then I stopped because I struggle getting up in the morning. I'm like the worst morning person, but I try really hard. And then I stopped trying really hard. And then, so I was like not journaling really for probably like a month. And I was like down, and my husband was like, you need to start doing your morning routine again. Cause that's when you came up with all these like cool ideas. And I was like, what?
Totally.
Like, why are you right? Like what? Stop. So yeah. And he was like, sometimes you need a kick in the butt and you need to just get up. Okay. Like nobody wants to get up. You just have to get up. And I was like, again, why are you right? Like stop being right. So I think it's so true though, just what you were saying, that having that daily practice, whatever it is, if it's for a long time for me, it was running, and I still run. I live in Florida, so running in the summer is no-go. But for a long time, running was that. It was like a running meditation. But just anything, if it's meditation, if it's journaling, if it's just taking a walk in nature with the AirPods out so you can hear the birds, whatever it is, just cultivating that daily practice is so key. I also just want to ask you just to go back to meditation, and for anybody listening who has started their practice and is struggling with it and it's like, I can't get past like 5 minutes and I'm sitting there and I don't know if I'm doing it right. Like there's all these thoughts coming in, and how do you have just like a clear mind? Can you speak to that like beginner meditator or advanced meditator who's also having those issues?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate you asking it, and something I think is vital to getting this out there in an accessible way to people. And I think you hit the nail on the head in saying that like beginners and advanced meditators experience the same thing. Like my mind can be a mess in the morning if my thoughts get carried away. And sometimes I'm just sitting with my thoughts being like, fuck, this sucks. Like I'm agitated. Like, this is not fun. Like meditation is not always just, the Zen den. It's in large part that there is a calming that happens from it. And that can happen in a meditation sitting. It can happen in a moment. It definitely compounds over time with practice. But a large part of the practice, and this is like a reframing of the way that I think it's conceptualized for most people who are on the outside or just starting, a big part of the practice is just learning to be with. There's such depth to our human experience, the level of the body, the mind, thoughts, emotions. There's energy states, like even the pushing up the hill and down the hill, like that might not necessarily be a thought or emotion. That might just be an energy, which is felt on a different level. So it's just building awareness. It's learning to be with. And I think the motivation for that is that what we repress and resist, we actually reinforce. So coming back to...
Whoa, say it again. Say it again.
What we repress and what we resist, we create more of. So running around on the hedonistic treadmill, we're reinforcing these, coming back to that like 12 hours of the desk. Like if you don't know any better, you're just going to continue to do that. Like, and that's just happening unconsciously. Whereas like when you start to build awareness, I think a lot of people listening to this or in your studio here, they catch on to that part of us that's saying, get me out of here. This sucks, and it's like building awareness to be able to recognize and hold space for the clarity of the body and the mind that's underneath the surface, the joyful emotions, the positive emotions, as well as the hard emotions, because a lot of the times, many of us are running around with sadness and anger and anxiety just ruling us underneath the surface. And meditation is not about pushing that away or pushing the thoughts away or like, oh, I want to have a clear, easy go. That can be the result sometime, and it's great. And especially if you commit to a deep practice, a consistent practice, a retreat, you're going to get some of those benefits. It's great. But really, the best thing is shining light on the fullness of the human experience. And that gives contrast to, you can't have happiness without sadness. Like you can't have jubilance without anger. And so if we're repressing all the anger and the sadness and the anxiety, we're not really fully accessing the rest of the emotional rainbow and spectrum. So for those of you out there who are like, I can't do that. I think a lot of things people say is like, I can't do this. I'm not doing this right. I can't meditate. My mind's too busy. You're not alone. Everyone's mind is very busy. It's normal. Normalization is one of the most valuable things you get out of a meditation practice. Oh, this is normal. Oh, my mind's thinking. I love what my teacher just said. The mind secretes thoughts like the mouth secretes saliva. It's just what it does. Like
that's why it's there.
That's why it's there. If you're trying to push them away, you're just going to reinforce them. So meditation is a practice. When you're starting it, maybe, oh man, I really would love the calm and the zen. Like that can come if you keep with it. But how it's going to happen is maybe not how you expect it, because you're going to start to learn to be like, oh, I'm feeling restless. Oh, I'm feeling sad. Can I turn towards it? Can I be with this? And when these energies and the emotions and these thoughts are less fed by our pushing them down, and they have less power over us. And that's when they start to dissolve. That's when they start to move. That's when you start to build awareness and be able to listen to them as information. So I could go on for hours about how this evolves into emotional maturity, authenticity, discipline. There's so many things. It's not just my mind is calm. Like it really is equipping you for being a deep, fulfilled, passionate human being and living life fully. Yeah. And that includes both the hard parts, but also the remarkably wonderful parts that I'm sure that you understand as someone who challenges themselves to do hard things. We learn that we can be with hard things.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I love just the embracing of the entire human experience, because it's what makes us human. And oh my gosh, I have so much to ask you. Okay, I'm not going to keep you forever. I do want to ask you
I'll go for longer.
a couple of things.
If you wanna...
I could keep people on forever. My producer's like, please, just like, is it bothering you to have to go through my like 3-hour-long podcast? One question that I have is your message with your life coaching business has a lot to do with personal growth within the context of a greater good. And I love that you touched on it at the beginning. Can you elaborate a little bit on what brought you to that main kind of concept, as opposed to people who are like, oh, personal growth and like, I'm great. And now, oh, my life is great and blah, blah, blah. As opposed to what you're, offering, which is if you do your work, it's going to affect everything. But you're going to say it a lot better than I will. So can you go into it?
I appreciate your insight and the way that you articulate things. So it's a great back and forth of reflection right now. Yeah, I think underlying it, there is a motivation in it. And something I learned in relationship and in the way that you can articulate to motivate people is if you can put yourself in the shoes of another and understand like how to really, or this is a coaching strategy, how to articulate the benefits as much as possible, because that's going to draw people in. That's going to motivate people. When we look to a place of possibility and the positive things that can come from it, we're much more motivated than if we're driven by the negative. And so I think a cultural concept that really needs to be overridden here is the idea that self-focus is selfish, that if you are to focus on yourself, if you were to care for yourself, you to love yourself, like we are such a people-pleasing culture. And I think that's, so another plug, if anybody's in Denver, my partner and I are hosting a workshop on people-pleasing called Rockin' the Boat, Ceasing the Habit of People-Pleasing in Denver. But cool. I think that we're social beings in a highly social context that we're in. We're getting pulled left and right to do things for other people, and we're thinking that's what's going to get us happy. And so there's this resistance to the idea of caring for oneself as something that's important or valuable. And so what I've come to realize in my own journey and in my own practice, and I think Joe Dispenza said something once in a podcast that really clicked for me, is like, when you're full, like you just want to share that. When your cup of love is full, it overflows. Like it's just energetically, there's an understanding of that, but I've felt it kinesthetically in my life. When I'm full and doing the things that light me up, I don't want to fucking share that. There's no selfishness, but when you're depleted, when you're exhausted, when you're doing something that's not true to you, you're living a lie you don't want to share. You want to defend yourself. And so the intention behind that is, A, it's true. B, there is a desire to save our planet from sinking. And we need to do that collectively. But the collective really is a reflection of the individual and a compilation of the individuals. So there's a motivating force in saying that, hey, when you take care of yourself, you're actually supporting the greater good. Because I think that's a hump that people need to get over when we do so much people pleasing to think about others first. And there's a really beautiful gift in wanting to serve others. but we're so limited if we're not able to serve ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so my message is, hey, like you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be healthy, and you don't, it doesn't even need to be about other people. It
Mm-hmm.
can just be about you. And that's beautiful enough. And the truth is, when you give yourself that, you're actually giving to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I believe, is the attitude, the cultural attitude we need as individuals and as communities in order to make this a better world.
I love it. I love it. Thanks. So well said. Oh my gosh. Mic drop. Amazing. I was meditating yesterday and this thing came up and I was like, oh, how convenient that I'm interviewing Quiggy tomorrow. And I was like, I asked one of my Reiki friends and she gave me an answer, and I'm curious to know what your answer is. So sometimes, a lot of the time when I'm meditating, I will get like very tingly hands. And I was like, oh, I'm going to ask Quiggy, what is that? Like, it's like my hands get like super tingly.
The direct answer is, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Is it something you need to get looked at? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, but I think what's more important is your relationship and how you are able to relate to it as a practice. So I guess the question for you, is it uncomfortable? Does it alarm you?
No, it's just like, it's like a curiosity.
Beautiful. So that is part of the attitude, the energy. So not only are we cultivating awareness, but you're cultivating care and kindness and curiosity. And when those lenses are strengthened in your meditation practice, they show up more frequently in your life. Even when you maybe come across something that's like, oh, this is weird, what's going on? But instead of being like, oh, like, get away from me, like, I'm going to die, I need to cut my hands off. Like, if you can show up with curiosity, you're going to be a lot more at peace. You're going to be able to respond rather than react. So I think the invitation is that there's a practice for you to play. And so you can shift your attention instead of being on the breath or the body, you can focus on the hand, get curious, like, what's going on here? Is the sensation static? Is it moving? Does it cover the whole hand? Is it warm? Is it cold? Like, start to explore that and deepen your connection with your body, with your mindfulness. And then also you can play with kind of letting it go and coming in and out of it. Like, if it is something that comes up and you're like, oh, I was focusing on my breath, but now this thing's coming up and I can't center, then you can make that your object of meditation and kind of sit with it for a little bit until it's just like with the anger or the sadness, the things that like are under the surface and they're holding us. When we turn towards them, and we say, hey, you're welcome. You can stay. They have less of a grip on our attachment. Or on our attention, we become less attached to them. And so it frees up energy then to move your attention elsewhere. So you can meditate on the hands. You can meditate a little bit. Notice how your maybe focus, maybe your fixation on it starts to drop. And then you can come back to something else.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that about the attachment, because I think, and just that infant, I think that can be very much applied to just everyday annoyances that come up where it's like you want to push it away and you're just like, okay, fine, just stay. It almost takes the power away from it. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. I'm going to wrap up. I just want to do a couple rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Okay. What is the best advice you've ever been given currently? Like any advice that's currently like really resonating with you?
Yeah. I just love the practice of reflective questions that you can ask in the moment to yourself to redirect yourself. And I really like this one that I'm learning is, what am I taking too seriously right now?
Yeah.
And it just helps shift me from I'm really like stressed about, am I going to get this result and this, and to be like, whoa, chill out, have fun with it.
What is your favorite daily practice right now and why?
You're going for a walk. Okay, daily practice. Yoga Nidra has been really awesome for me.
Can you explain what that is?
So Yoga Nidra it's also called non-sleep deep rest. And so I'm not totally sure of the history and the yogic tradition of Yoga Nidra, but it's definitely something that's been around for a while. But the scientific lens has better understood it as a way to offer a nervous system reset and deep rest for your brain without actually falling asleep. So it's like a meditative nap, like a guided meditative nap. And you basically are guided through different points, focusing your attention in your body. And it really can recover energy without taking away the sleep drive that builds out through the day. So it's a great way it also resets your dopamine baseline, which is a really important thing in terms of motivation and happy. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Huberman Lab, Stanford neurobiologist. He talks about all these things. A lot of great benefits from Yoga Nidra. It feels great after lunchtime when I'm starting to have a crash to just reset, pause, decelerate. That's been majorly helpful for me.
Cool. Okay. You're also a DJ. So this is like, I can't wait for your answer. What is your current go-to pump up song?
Oh, How High by Louis the Child. Louis the Child, you know Louis the Child?
Yeah.
They're like just the most funky, upbeat, positive, love center, incredible hip hop beat producer, electronic music dude. Yeah, they just make this like upbeat, infectious, like fire music. So they just came out with the new songs, How High. It's like their old school stuff, and it just gets me real good.
Ooh, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to listen to it. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much you have been so generous with your time. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you for coming on. And we're going to include everything in the show notes. So everything you need to know about Quiggy, anything that he has mentioned, we're going to include that. And if you're in the Denver area, check him out. What is your Instagram handle if anyone's interested?
Yeah, Quigg Cultivation. And if I may quickly share, so the Quigg Stag dances we do monthly.
Okay.
There'll be one every month.
All right, cool. Thank you, Quiggy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the way that you interview and ask questions and reflect.
Thank you.
Really a privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to market in the most authentic and natural and fun way versus like trying to run a social media page, which is like, I don't want to do this.
I know it's hard, but of course, anytime you can come on and plug anything. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I'm so grateful for your precious time and energy. And if anything resonated with you, please feel free to share with a friend and subscribe. If you're interested in career coaching, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Courtney@resume-careers.com and follow me on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page. Thank you so much and see you next week.